Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back. Do you bully yourself? Do you bully yourself? I want to talk about that and its impact on soul growth. You know, when you think about bullying, thoughts that came to my mind that may come to your mind as well is kind of this bullying quality of intimidation. Or even some quality of tormenting yourself or browbeating yourself or even because of the bullying that takes place, it creates the oppression or suppression of who you really are. But we don't think about this necessarily, its impact on our soul. We may not even think about whether we actually bully ourselves because we may not think about some of the things we say or some of the things we do is bullying. We just think it's kind of the good. It's helping us in some ways, but it may not be. So that's what I'm here to talk about in this episode, especially the impact that it might have, the self-bullying that may have on your soul and your soul evolution. But let's first talk about what bullying really consists of, because there is the external bullying that takes place, and then there's also the internal bullying, and that's what I'm more interested in. But I thought it might be helpful to talk a little about the external bullying in general. So when we think about bullying, we think about it also as a form of aggression. And as I said before, intimidation or even tormenting or pushing yourself to do something, or the bullies coercing yourself. So when you think about this quality of intimidation or even tormenting and coercion that can take place with the bullying type of behavior towards you, you think about sometimes occurring in childhood, on the playground, or you think about in elementary school when it happened with some boys and some girls that were taunting you or tormenting you or wanting, especially in playgrounds or as a young child, your lunch money. And so they did whatever they, did, to try to get that. And part of that was bullying. Or moving into adolescence, that bullying happened to that in social cliques and social circles that they were excluding you from or not wanting to share with you, what event or social gathering was at a person's home or party that was taking place. And in the workplace, bullying does happen in the workplace too. It could be like a colleague or a senior manager in a group or even a boss who's browbeating you because they want you to do something or they want you to step down from being the first author on a grant. They want to be the main author on that grant that's being submitted that you actually wrote, but they may be bullying you in some ways. And these are the different types of bullying that can happen. So there are specific types of bullying, and there's a lot of research that's out on bullying now that we can look at. And like I said, I'm just talking about some things in general about the external bullying. But what I really want to be getting into is the internal bullying that we can do with ourselves and its impact on your soul. So the different types of bullying that can occur externally that you also can think may happen internally within ourselves as well, is the verbal bullying, the badgering that happens that people do for us. That can happen internally as well, right? And then there's the relational bullying, that in a relationship that we may be involved with, and that can be, a personal relationship, a romantic relationship, a familiar, a family type of relationship, that bullying may take place. And then there's the physical bullying, the physical, contact, aggression that's being shown towards you, or in a situation towards another person that can take place. And then there's also the cyberbullying, because we live in the digital age. That certainly is occurring, and occurs more often than not, unfortunately. And then because of the relationships that we may find ourselves in and certain expectations people have, there's a sexual bullying that happens and want us to be involved, in terms of the intimacy component of this. But it's still, if it's against your will, it's bullying. And that's the other quality about bullying, is usually against our will, against what we want. That takes place. And the last type of bullying of all those ones that I mentioned is the prejudicial bullying. This is prejudice, showing a bias, bullying that happens. That's very overt, maybe, in a social gathering or in a public way that happens. You probably have heard of some of these types of bullying that take place. You may have heard of all of them or some of them, but they're just definitely out there. And there's probably other types of bullying that I haven't even mentioned. They have their impact upon us. They do have their impact upon our well-being and how we feel about ourselves and feel about the situation or circumstance that we find ourselves in. All these types of bullying, types of activities that are taking place, they are all ways in which there is verbal or written attack, some type of attack that is against the person that's being bullied, against you. And there are also social torment that occurs in that bullying. Also the physical aggression that takes place with all these different types of bullying that I mentioned. And there, as I mentioned, is a lot of information out there in articles and research that's being done about bullying. But guess what? There's less information on the spiritual aspects on bullying. What happens to us spiritually when we have this bullying occurring? Specifically, what I'm talking about in our time today is about the internal bullying, you bullying yourself. And I've given this some thought. I probably will have more thoughts as well, but I'd like to share with you my current thought, which is evolving. So let's get into that a little bit. Switch gears in terms of this. Stop bullying yourself, your inner space, your sanctity in your heart and mind and soul and being. This internal bullying can be happening for years. It can start in childhood and go up to the current age that you may have. And if you're a seeker, you want to better understand from the previous years of what has evolved and how this may show itself to you. So I have some thoughts about it, that internal bullying. And so you look back on your years, you look back and see if you could see any of this happening to you and even your current state. So the first type of internal bullying that I'd like to put before you is flaw bullying. Yes, finding flaws in yourself that we think is helping us in some ways. But my question to you, is it bullying? And this involves finding all or some of your weaknesses and shortcomings and deficits and deficiencies that there are. And you're now saying that I'm unsatisfied, I don't like it, I don't appreciate it, I don't want it. But these are qualities not to put so much of a focus around. It's just start to work on improving and not get into hating them, the flaws. The flaws are there for a reason. Nothing happens by chance. There's something for us to garner, to learn, to change, to advance in our growth as we're looking at this through the lens of the soul, progress and soul evolution. So the second type of bullying that we can do internally with ourselves is it's good for you type of bullying, the IGFY bullying. And we think that having high expectations, they have their place, that through these expectations, we can have a better understanding or restraint that can take place for ourselves, that we're chastising ourselves and saying, well, you shouldn't be doing this, or we shouldn't be doing that, or, and maybe some of that's true, but it's good for you type of attitude that you're having, that you're actually chastising yourselves. You're chastising, being critical, being judgmental, being condemning of yourselves and your behavior. You can go back and listen to criticism, condemnation, and judgment in the beginning part of the year around this time. So in terms of January, February time, and you can go back and listen to that. But this type of is good for you, bullying that you're doing with, well, you deserved it, because you didn't do this, or you didn't respond this way, or because you forgot whatever. So whatever you get is good for you. What happens is this will push us to keeping focus on this negativity, the CCJ, which I talked about in that episode last year. That CCJ is only keeping us in this negative spin, negativity, which is a negative spiral, pushing down ourselves or pushing down our self-esteem or levels of self-confidence. So be kind of aware, how it shows up. It's good for you, the IGFY type of bullying. Then the third type that I wanted to mention as I was thinking about this internal bullying that takes place, that we need to stop it in its tracks, pivot in a different way with ourselves, is what I call the SNAP bullying. S-N-A-P, SNAP bullying, which stands for slowly not at peace bullying. And these can happen in the short or long-term types of expectations that we do have of ourselves. It gets into this quality of irritation because of what's happening around us. Again, this slow, not at peace, this agitation that's happening within us, that we're overriding and not knowing that we can have inner peace, which is so important for the soul. Getting back to the SNAP bullying, it can be wearing to our own inner self. It can be not only irritating, but also disturbing. And that disturbance, it's like in Star Wars when Luke said about feeling the force. The force is with you, but you can also feel when there's a disturbance in the force that's taking place. There's a degree of sensitivity that one has to be able to feel that disturbance. But if you have these SNAP, slowly not at peace types of disturbances happening within you, then you're not going to feel the force. You're going to feel the irritation. And it can be subtle, or it can be overt. It can be this loud sensation that happens, or it can be a more subtle type of sensation of agitation that is happening. But all of these are forms of bullying ourselves. I bet you never thought about that. So I'm suggesting that there are these inner bullies, which we have to gain some mastery over. And maybe one of those first steps of mastery is getting control over them, acknowledge them, seeing them when they're showing up to us, these three types of bullying that take place. So maybe we need to be alert and start looking at when we get into the flaw bullying, or when we get into it's good for you bullying, or when we get into the slowly not at peace, the SNAP bullying. We say, I see you. I see it taking place. What do I want to do about it? You need to do something about it if you're walking a spiritual path, because it places the soul in like a prison. And the guard at the door is fear. Bullying has a quality of keeping us fearful and not fearless. And we prefer to be fearless and not fearful. And we have to kind of help ourselves and create for some comfort or attunement to our soul and our inner Christ, like qualities that we're trying to garner and develop. Otherwise, this constant churning and this constant fear creates for the soul a sense of insecurity and a detachment and a hiding. Sometimes our soul becomes dormant. It goes deeper into ourselves, so we don't know it's necessarily even there because it wants to protect itself. And when we are able to understand when these types of inner bullying is taking place, we begin to sense, like on that Star Wars, when there's a disruption in the force. And that force is your soul energy, the substance of your life. And for those who are walking a spiritual path, as I mentioned, you need to spot it and then stop bullying yourself. You need to identify it when it's happening and stop it. And there are 3 things maybe that you can do to help you to move in a different direction with yourself when you find these inner bullying and even the outer bullying is happening to you. Be aware of your inner talk. That's the first thing. As you're looking at how it shows itself up in your consciousness and in your thinking patterns, and as you begin to start filtering what's happening to you and start to maybe take a little journal of what you expect from yourself, what shows up in your world, and what does any one of these bullying types of activities, these inner bullies, kind of show up to try to take away your inner peace, your inner composure through that criticism, condemnation, and judgment of yourself, then that's what you need to stop. You need to begin to look at your aspirations and your hopes that you have for yourself and see them in a realistic way and see if they need to be tweaked in any way. I'm not saying it's not good to have, aspirations and hopes, and that's fine. But if those aspirations and hopes move you into some form of bullying yourself, then you need to re-examine them. And so some of that involves the next quality that is so important for us to garner and develop with ourselves, and that is empathy. Empathy, knowing that you're not going to always do it right, or you're not going to always see it. It's like slipping so quickly on that banana peel that you're on the floor and don't realize, oh my God, that quality of what I just said to myself, or that behavior that I just did to myself, or that way in which I began to, get into the snap bullying, or get into the bullying that relates to you criticizing yourself in some particular way that is good for you, bullying, or the bullying that takes place when you're finding all the flaws in yourself, or the bullying that takes place when you are noticing that you are slowly not at peace with yourself, and that snap bullying type of quality. Then when those things begin to happen for you, have empathy. And empathy is a quality of self-compassion, of care, of understanding that we're not always going to say it, do it, be it in the right way. And we can be flexible with ourselves and correct ourselves when we need to correct ourselves in our thinking and our reactions to what's going on internally in ourselves, and being more at peace and more attuned to the fact that, didn't do it right that time. I'm not thinking really great thoughts right now. Let me just switch it. Let me change my thoughts. Let me have an affirmation that I can say to myself, all is well, or it's getting better, or I'm doing the best I can, and each day is getting better and better. Whatever you want to say to be empathetic with yourself is important, because when we are more caring and compassionate, more loving and more empathetic with ourselves, we can hold ourselves accountable then. That we can say, okay, I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do this in a different way. I'm no longer going to be grumbling with myself about my expectation, about what this person should or should not have done. And instead, I'm going to say, that's them. Let me be me. Let me let go. Let me move on. The other quality that this brings up with this empathy is a quality of being kind to yourself as well as being kind to others, but with firmness in expectations, making course corrections in your thoughts or feelings and behaviors. Well, that's really helpful as you're trying to stop bullying yourself. The third aspect I was thinking about that could be of help to us when we're trying not to get into this inner bullying to take place, and maybe even the key to unlock the prison door that I mentioned earlier that we can place ourselves in. I guess it would be what I would call high touch. High touch. That is reaching up or reaching within you, deep within you, into your soul and into your mind and into your heart, and welcoming the Christ, the Christ-like energies, welcoming the humility, the kindness, which I will talk about and continue to talk about, within ourselves, that we are taking a time to pause and invite light to come into our being. Fill us with light. Fill us with kindness. Fill us with compassion. Fill us with care to ourselves. So then we can show that compassion and care to others. But compassion, care, empathy, we have to garner with ourselves. And once we have it within us, then we can be able to truly give it to others. Once we have it within us, then our soul starts to sparkle. Because those qualities that I just mentioned are qualities not only of the soul, but the environment in which the soul thrives in, of compassion, of kindness, of empathy for oneself, of being flexible, of holding oneself accountable, of how you're thinking, feeling, and reacting. All of those are wonderful things to be able to do as you're walking a spiritual path, as you're inviting God into your life to help you walk in the spiritual path. You're now moving away from the inner bully and you're moving into the greater sense of who you really are. And that is the majesty of the God, of the soul, the substance of your life that exists within you, that is here on planet Earth to learn certain things, to have certain experiences, to gain certain wisdom, and to be in listening grace to the higher source that is trying to teach and guide you, and not to the lower self, which is the ego persona. Something to think about. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.